Hello, my name is Sadashisa Kato. I'd like to present a collaborative research with Yusuke Ueno. I'm really sad that I couldn't travel to Taiwan at this point of time under the circumstances, because I have many good Taiwanese friends that I made in the US. Here's our research. Background. We all know that green spaces and parks are valuable green infrastructure that provide various social ecological benefits, including health. And the COVID-19 pandemic triggered social reactions, such as changes in people's behaviors, including contact with nature. And the onset of the pandemic in early 2020 brought about lifestyle restrictions that were mostly falsely set in place by the governments. But for Japan, the situation was a little different because most of us voluntarily obeyed these lifestyle restrictions under the emergency declaration. The research objective is to analyze the changes in the behaviors of Kanazawa citizens before meeting 2019 and during 2020, the pandemic. In particular, we are interested in seeing the changes in the use of green spaces, how people used green spaces, how the use changed. The research methods, first, let's look at the study area, which is Kanazawa City. It is located on the northern coast of the main island facing the Sea of Japan. It is the capital of Ishikawa Prefecture, as we can see here. The population is a little over 460,000 people. And there are many well-known tourist destinations, such as the castle, Kenrokuen Garden, and Higashicha District. And the city has many urban parks, over 570 parks, totaling the area 300 hectares. We use a mobile tracking GPS data, which is the locational data of cell phone terminals with an error accuracy of about 50 to 100 meters. We acquired data 15 days each from May 1st to 15th, 2019 and 2020, which includes a week-long period of holidays when many Japanese people travel. And we designated citizens as those records that continually stayed in the city at night. So the data has 2 years of records and the acquisition time of more than 220 hours per day, which leaves us with over 5,480 terminals, which is about 1.18% of actual Kanazawa citizens. The following numbers were compared between 2019 and 20. The number of visits per day, time spent outside the home, the straight line distance from home to destination, and means of transportation, and types and locations of outings. We also examined the relationship, looked at in particular the relationship between the rate of decrease, increase, the number of visits to each green space, and the distance traveled. Here are results and discussion. Well, overall, in 2020, as expected, there are a lot fewer people going out, both weekdays and holidays. Next, people went out less on both weekdays and holidays in 2020 compared to 2019. Also, people spent less time outside the house on weekdays and holidays. So there was a tendency to avoid going out at all for long periods of time in 2020, which suggests how people voluntarily obeyed the declaration of a state of emergency. The figure shows the maximum distance traveled per day. Note that the vertical scale is different between 19 and 20. So these figures show that the most common distance traveled in both 2019 and 20 was between 0 to 1,000 meters. In 2020, fewer people traveled more than 1,000 meters. There were few trips made more than 4,000 meters during holidays. So again, there's a tendency to avoid going out for more than 1,000 meters in 2020. Means of transportation. Overall, people use cars and other means most often. But for the percent change, 2020, as in this figure, saw an increase in the percentage of outings by walking, especially on holidays. And there was a relative decrease in bicycling and car and other means. The percentage visit by destination for green areas and commercial areas did not change significantly. And here again, the number of visits decreased for all destinations in 2020. But look at this figure, the percentage decrease for green areas was smaller than commercial areas. The figure shows the percentage change in the number of visits in 2020 compared to 2019. The larger a bubble is, the more visitors the green space has. The vertical shows the median distance traveled to each green space on the particular percentage change of visits. So we can see that green space visitors from short distances, less than 1,000 meters, increased in 2020. Generally, the distance visit is shorter in 2020, and green spaces with a large increase in the number of visits in 2020 have a visiting distance of around 1,000 meters, which means that they are often visited by people from nearby areas. We can see that white bubbles, which are 2020, are located below the dark bubbles 2019. And those bubbles with a large percentage increase are located below 1,000 meters. So the number of visits to nearby parks and other green spaces near residential areas increased in 2020, which has planning implications for the importance of nearby green spaces during the periods of lifestyle restrictions. Discussion. In 2020, during the pandemic, people avoided going out at all, including visits to large green spaces in city center, which was a popular destination in 2019, to avoid crowding and unnecessary contact with other people. But the previous figure showed that visits within 1,000 meters of home increased under the pandemic, and visits to green spaces around residential areas within a short distance from home increased in particular. So this suggests nearby green spaces within a 1,000-meter radius provided people with opportunities to use them for health maintenance and refreshment. Our analysis also revealed that even if there's a green space within 1,000 meters from home, many people actually don't use it. Though the parks closest to home are considered to be those that are easily used, but in reality, they're not always the most frequently used. So there are other factors related to park use, such as like diversity of park facilities, and more generally, people's nature experiences are determined by opportunity and orientation or emotional affinity with nature. And this is found to be more influential in the latest study. These studies suggest that when planning green spaces in a city, it's important not only to consider park proximity, but also place green spaces, including parks, in a way that matches the needs of the users. So we need to organize activities and events, form policies, make education to increase people's nature orientation, which is important for encouraging people's use of and visit to green spaces. Finally, conclusions. The declaration of the state of emergency in 2020 changed the outing behavior of Kanazawa citizens. Specifically, there was a strong tendency for them to avoid going out, with a decrease in the number, time, distance of outings. However, the rate of decrease in the number of visits to green spaces was smaller compared to commercial areas. The number of walks increased slightly from 2019. The distance traveled to green spaces was generally shorter in 2020, and the number of visits to green spaces near one's home increased in 2020. These findings suggest that those who had green spaces around their homes were able to use them for maintaining their health and refreshment during the COVID-19 pandemic, adding to the increasing evidence for the value of urban green spaces as part of nature-based solutions. We'd like to acknowledge data analysis and research assistance, and the content of the presentation is based on the following book chapter, which will be published later this year. And here's my contact information in case you have any more further questions. Thank you very much.